Good morning, everyone. As a feared pugilist and street poet Mike Tyson once said, you always have a great plan until someone punches you in the face. I was laid out flat on a cold, hard operating table, similar to the one that you see here. And as the anesthesiologist told me to count backwards from 100, 99, 98, 97, and I slowly began to drift off. All I could think about as I dozed off were these faces. Now, I told my wife knew what was the deal was. I told my son as we drove, I dropped him off at Michigan State that fall, and I told him on the drive out from the airport to Michigan State. But my daughter was a different story. She was a senior in high school, and she took after her dad. When I would come home on the weekends, or when I wanted to get a little extra creativity in, I would sit in front of my Wacom tablet, and my daughter would sit on my lap, and she eventually took that Wacom pen from me, and she became an artist. So that year, she was getting together her portfolio. She was doing all of her college application stuff, and we didn't want to interrupt that. So a couple of days before my procedure, we sat down at our kitchen table, that same kitchen table where when she was a baby like this, she would jump off the table into my arms. I'd take a step back, she'd dump into my arms, and it was the toughest thing I ever had to do. I told her, there's a possibility that tomorrow I may not come home. And when I woke up, my cardiologist showed me these two pictures. Oops, I went too fast. Here, show me these two pictures. I had two 100% blocked arteries. Unfortunately, he was able to get them operating again, and I didn't know what was next. Did I want to go back to work? Would I be the same? Did I even want to do the work that stressed me out to the point where I had a heart event? Fortunately, I call her my angel, a person named Dina came to my bedside, and she told me about a program at the hospital. It was a cardio rehab program where there would be 90 days of education to help me heal psychologically, emotionally, as well as some physical components that would help get me back up and about. So I decided to take a leave of absence, 90-day leave of absence. And it was difficult for me to take one step. Just to go to the bathroom, I was dizzy. So from that point on, I took one step, which became 4 steps, which became a quarter mile, which became a lap at the park. And I found myself in front of this location. The previous slide was, I was up at every park in the Santa Clarita Valley. I was trying to get back. I was in the hills crying to myself, thinking what was going to become of me. This was the highest point in the Santa Clarita Valley. So the reason I'm telling you this is like today, our session is going to be broken down into similar tasks like this. I was like, how can I get to the top of this hill? I'll have to take it in small chunks. So at the beginning, we're going to talk a little bit about my journey. Then we're going to talk about nobility, WordPress. And at the end, hopefully we'll interact and I'll answer some of your questions and we'll go from there. So I decided to go ahead. There was some media folks, they would ask Michael Jordan, how do you score so many points? How do you lead the league in scoring? And he said, I break it down into small chunks. First quarter, I get this much. Second quarter, I get this much. And at the end of the game, I'm here. So I decided I would try to get this done in 90 days. And how would I do it? In small chunks. So today we'll take this session in small chunks. I would love for you to interact, ask questions. Again, this is a basic level class. What I tend to do is in the WordPress community, and this is a first for me, speaking in person at Nobility. I've done it online during the pandemic, as well as participated in the air competition. So this is really an honor to be here today, but I wasn't sure on the audience. So hopefully I'll give you what you need. It'll teach me better for next time. So let's get started. 3 days before the 90 days, this was my view. I made it to the top of the hill and I saw the entire Santa Clarita Valley. And I decided during those 90 days as I healed, I was going to truly give back When my daughter finished college, I was done my current job. I was going to give back to the people that really meant a lot to me. WordPress was one, Nobility was one. And I used to do a lot more creativity, a lot more art. So I decided at that point my life was going to change. And that's what brings me here today before you. And you may be wondering, what the heck does this have to do with today's topic? It has a lot, because all of our journeys can diverge or change or merge into something else. And again, as I stand before you today, this is an incredible honor because, oh, and by the way, I'm going to have lots of resource links in a couple of forums. You'll be able to scan this and get the slides. There's also a Google Doc that has over 75 links. I really believe in giving back, but also giving you resources to sort of learn on your own. Is there a way to remove the close the meeting box? Lower right. Yeah, thank you. All right. I was aware, or I became aware of accessibility way back in 2008. In January, there was a Nobility conference in Los Angeles. I had just became our company's, like I was really young at the time, I became our company's webmaster on the web team. And as in most big companies, they always get tickets to stuff. Our IT folks had tickets to this conference. They didn't want to go. I volunteered to go because I was eager to learn my new job. And that's when I learned what accessibility was. I learned about, HTML, making that accessible, PDFs, now deprecated Flash, but it gave me a new purpose in terms of what I would do in my new job. I wanted to make everything accessible. And I became that pain in the butt at the office that they were always trying to avoid. We were a government agency, and it was going to be my job to make our website accessible. What also happened at that time was our lead developer and our CSS goddess, they both left our company within a month of each other. And I inherited a WordPress site. And so I was like, I basically was learning HTML. I was good at doing PDF stuff, but what is this WordPress thing? Fortunately, we had a budget, and they sent me to the WordPress VIP Intensive Developer Workshop. But I was no developer. I was just an HTML hack learning this new software. And so I went up to Napa Valley, and something amazing happened. The first day, they said, spin up a virtual box. And I was like, what is a virtual box? And what was amazing was that the guy that's next to me here, he was probably sick of me by the end of the day, but everybody helped. Everybody turned around, held my hand, got me going. The WordPress VIP Intensive Workshop was where Time Magazine, CBS, all the big enterprises that are on WordPress, it's their hosting system. But the amazing thing, everybody wasn't too busy or too big to help. And a lot of tech that we work in, that's definitely not the case. So that was amazing. And that was the day I learned what WordPress community was all about. And we'll talk a little bit about that today. And again, it's about giving back. And when I decided I wanted to do something different, that's why I thought of them, because from that moment on, they taught me how to do some of the development things like committing and things like that. I had to be very disciplined in working in WordPress VIP. And I learned what WordCamp meetups were. And in the next 90 days, I attended anything and everything and tried to do as much as I could in the community. Again, this is a little bit about the theme that it was my first child theme for those that are familiar with WordPress. But again, don't worry if that term doesn't mean anything. Again, this is sort of your entry level into WordPress. And so these are some of the things I had to do right away. But first, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I graduated as a graphic designer, and I worked at Fortune 500 companies with one thing. They had one thing in common. They all went through major mergers. When I was at when I was at Burroughs, we merged with Sperry and we became Unisys. When I was at Chrysler Corporation, we merged with AMC. And for the last 33 years, I've been with Metro Los Angeles. And we were the train side of the company, and we merged with the bus side of the company. All of that really prepared me for doing large branding, corporate identity stuff. But at Metro, my focus was going to be, I switched from the design department, self-taught web person, was moving forward in WordPress. We're currently trying to get people out of their cars and onto trains. The funny thing, or the silly thing about Los Angeles, is that they had a rail system 50 years ago, and they said, you know what? This new thing called the automobile, we should tear everything up. And now no one can get around the city, poor air quality, and we're trying to put them back in. All right. I also began to speak at conferences, volunteering in front of the stage, behind the stage, organizing conferences, just doing anything and everything to learn as much as possible. I designed my first child theme. I managed a 15-blog network at Metro, and it was about, and at this point, it's about trying to go out and communicate about WordPress, teach WordPress in emerging and underrepresented communities. Some of the pictures you see here was from Thailand, Costa Rica, Central Los Angeles. Anywhere and everywhere there's something to do in WordPress. I'm trying to learn, give back, and grow. So that brings us to today's topic, beginning your accessibility journey with WordPress. The funny thing about me was that I was a weekend warrior / athlete kind of guy. But later in life, I started getting injured. You know, I had my knee scoped, rotator cuff torn, you know, ligament damage in my wrist. And then I told you about my heart event. So that made me think about this. A stat that, you know, we all know that as we grow older, more of us become disabled. And that sort of tied into what Knowbility was doing in terms of, but no, it made me think, why do we wait to advocate for accessibility after we have a disability or someone in our family does? Why isn't it a part of, you know, when I graduated from college, none of my classes told me about what accessibility was. If I didn't attend that conference, you know, I run into so many, as a matter of fact, yesterday, there was someone in one of the classes who mentioned something that I've heard from my colleagues 30 years ago. She said, I hate underline links. I would just, that's an inside joke if you don't get it. But because so many people hate underlines, or, you know, remember the gray text that was underline link about 15 years ago? Anyway, so I actually became a statistic. I was officially disabled in California temporarily for 90 days on 3 different occasions. And that gave me a chance to do what most of us don't do, use the products that we build, you know, to buy online groceries and things like that. I found out, hey, our local grocery has a crappy website. But then another thing that I think most people don't think about is, like, when we're designing or we're building websites or developing websites, we think about maybe 1 or 2 disabilities. We don't really design for and test for as many as possible. So I bring this up because when I was at Metro, we had an equity liaison program that I was a part of. And our team presentation was on accessibility in transit. And she wanted to really focus on, one of our team members wanted to really focus on one station that was next to the Braille Institute. But I was like, we need to talk about the other disabilities that are impacted by poor transportation policy, et cetera, et cetera. So I bring this up to say that we really need to focus on testing for multiple disorders when we're building. All right. This is another funny story. I show this picture because I was at a WordPress meetup and listening to one of my good friends, I hope she's listening, talk about accessibility. She does legal stuff. So similar to the legal update yesterday, she would talk about legal things at meetups. And the person that was next to me, she turned and punched me in the shoulder. She said, ooh, accessibility makes me so angry. And it makes me think, why do people still resist making things accessible? And it's not like it just came about a year ago. It was 30 years ago when this stuff happened. And it also made me think, during the pandemic, one of the things that I found interesting, and again, I don't want to offend anyone, people were protesting because they felt like their civil liberties were being impinged on. They were, you know, truckers in Canada, disrupting the transit system, people protesting on the plane by not wearing a mask. There are a number of different forms where people displayed their anger or felt like, we had to stay home. That was such a discomfort. But it made me think in terms of this topic about the history of ADA. During the pandemic, this incredible documentary came out. I don't know if, show of hands, anyone seen it? It was so incredible in that it talked about how things were in the 60s and 70s. If you had a disability, chances were you probably committed to an institution and you had to look forward to a life of never leaving your house. You couldn't go to the restaurants, there probably wasn't a way for you to get out the door in your own house. And there were these teenagers that went to a camp in upstate New York, and 4 of them had incredibly distinguished lives. They became advocates for accessibility. They began to protest. They did sit-ins in California, all over the country. And it culminated, one of the things that was cool too, it was influenced by the civil rights movement. Accessibility is a civil right. We heard that yesterday during the legal update. And all these years later, we have to go back and revisit it, which is kind of silly. It culminated in an incredible Capitol crawl, where a number of people in the disabled community tried to climb the stairs of the Capitol. If you've been to Washington, that's a lot of stairs. And it brought to light, and it brought it to a head, which eventually resulted in the signing of the Americans with Disability Act. I go back to the pandemic, where one of the things that being at home showed me was a lot of companies, you had to get your site accessible or you could go out of business. The cool thing was you found certain companies, they began offering curbside and other things that, and it doesn't just help me, it helps everyone. And in terms of accessibility, that's what we can do. We can create systems and processes and technology that makes it easier for everyone. If you think about some of the accessibility improvements that have happened in the physical world, ramps outside of every building, paddles on the doors, wider entrances, all of those things, they don't just benefit the disabled, it benefits everyone. So if you think about when you're building something, if you're thinking about multiple audiences, you open up your audience if you're selling a product. Don't you want more people to buy your products? So why are you preventing them from using your website? The other thing that most people know about is what WebAIM started doing a few years back. They produce a report where they look at 1 million web pages. And the amazing thing is that in terms of complexity and whether they pass, about 95% of them fail. And that's an incredible statistic. And it's unsettling in that the areas that most people fail in aren't that difficult. In the previous presentation, when you get down to the nuts and bolts, like Leslie was talking about, you're solving big time problems. But why are web pages so inaccessible? These are the areas where most pages fail. And if you look at them, they're mostly very simple to solve. Low contrast text. And it goes back to the joke about the gray text or the non-underlined text. People need to read. Like if you're buying something from Amazon, if you're buying something online, you need to be able to read if you're reading a book online. And these are the areas that cause issues. So hopefully today I'll show you in the WordPress admin how you can address a couple of these pretty easily. So part of what I do, I love to get interaction. So I have a question, and I sort of talked about it a little bit, but I want to hear from you. Why do you think so many websites still fail in terms of basic accessibility? Any input or stuff?
I think a lot of times it's because the people that are creating the websites don't ever have to consider these accessibility features because they're not impacted by them.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point. Anyone else?
I also think it has to do with the role of the people who are filling the web developer spot. Like I have no formal web developer training, but I'm the communications manager for my organization. So the website falls under my purview.
Mm-hmm. That's perfect.
And often I think it's just a case of awareness. I think once people know better, they do better,
Mhm.
but there's no accessibility in most IT web development programs, and it needs to be in there because every IT person is going to have an impact on accessibility in whatever organization they join.
And to me, there's always a disconnect. There's a disconnect between the marketing group. Sorry, go ahead. No.
I was just going to say, because the stakeholder approved it,
Mm-hmm.
they don't know accessibility and they probably don't really care.
Yeah, I know. I always butted heads with our communication folks or our IT folks. Any other? Yes.
Basic design, conventional design, what works from a design perspective,
Yeah.
and how our heading's supposed to work. They don't necessarily understand that.
I know, and I heard a gentleman yesterday mention that when he first started, he designed his HTML based on, out of the box, H1, H2, H3, H4 have a certain look. And he was designing it based on the size of the text instead of being semantic. So again, a lot of people don't know the basics. So again, what I try to do is start from zero. And again, I try to adhere to the theory of the curse of knowledge, which means, a lot of times we think that everyone knows what's here in our head or have the expertise that we have, and we explain it that way. I try to really put it very basic, and I love interaction so that we all can think and sort of get through this together. Any other? I know. Or in the case of, I worked at the government agency, a lot of folks at the last minute, they would call us in. And at that point, it's way too late. It's like pouring the foundation and building your house and say, oh, I forgot to do the plumbing. And you have to tear up the concrete. Yes.
That was really the point I was going to make, is that a lot of times this gets considered at the very end of the project, or once you get called on it after all of the sites are up.
Yeah.
They are like, you do accessibility now. And it's just it's a huge undertaking because of people that don't like underlined links. And it's like, well, now you have to run every single change that you need to make per the guidelines past someone. And then it becomes that, well, now I don't like accessibility. Now I'm upset with accessibility because you have to underline my links and I want it to look this certain way. And it already did. And now I'm at, and then, sometimes the person that's enforcing these accessibility guidelines gets looked at as like a nag or something.
Oh, and that was me.
That. Right. Yeah.
That was me, unfortunately. All right. All right. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to add that a lot of developers I've worked with just assume that somebody else will take care of it. Like, oh, well, they have screen readers. Like, yes, that is technically true that people have screen readers. That doesn't mean it just automatically works. So just what goes into it, like, labels and roles and all of that.
Thank you. And there are a lot of norms in every company. I know yesterday I was talking with Darren about PDFs and why they just won't die. They've been around for 30 years and they're not accessible, or you have to put so much work into either the Word before you get to PDF or remediate on the back end. I don't get it. And at our agency, we're trying to build Rail back into communities. So we have a lot of printed stuff that we would send out. But as the web became more prominent, they still love to clutch on their printed stuff, which turned into PDF. So it's like trying to get someone to change. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't want to change 30 years later. All right. So I'm going to go through some basics about WordPress. I'm sure a lot of people know, but again, I'm assuming that some folks are new. It was started way back in 2003 by a gentleman named Mike Little and Matt Mullingweg when they created a fork of this B2 blog. Now WordPress has grown to be responsible for about 43%, 43% of the web, which is kind of incredible. It's not just a blogging platform. And I hear that as part of the arguments for not making it accessible is that, oh, it's just a blog platform. But now WordPress does so much more. We were talking yesterday about your WooCommerce site. It could do a little bit of everything. But again, we need to make sure it's accessible. This is some of their mission, blah, 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 that it's designed for everyone. It's open source software. That's one thing that I love about it. And I try to emphasize that it's got a very simple entry ramp. It's free. You can do it because it's free. There are a lot of plugins, themes, et cetera, that cost as you get into it. But I love, from a learning perspective, you can get in and self-teach or get online and find some resources. And we'll talk about some of that later. Again, these are some of their principles. It should be easy to set up. They always emphasize accessibility. One of the things that I did in the last 8 years post-Heart event was contribute to WordPress. I was part of the Make Accessibility team as a team rep, and there were some incredibly talented folks like the folks I've seen here. And that was one thing. I have a little bit of imposter syndrome because there's so many incredibly talented people at this conference, but I want to become part of this community because it sort of started me on my way. So that's one thing that I would love to see more of, a collaboration between these two communities. It's great for performance, security, and ease of use. They believe in democratizing publishing. Everyone should be able to say what they want to say, basically. If you have a platform, in some countries, they don't let you do that. So it's welcoming and inclusive. I've been very involved in putting on conferences and things like that. One of the things I want to share at the end, and I hope to hear from everyone that's here, some of your wins. I have a couple of cool things that I was able to do based on what I learned about accessibility from Knowbility and some of the things I wanted to do in the WordPress community that I want to share. But one of the things that's pretty cool is that if you have the desire, you can sort of do what you want to do in terms of making the space more inclusive and welcoming. All right, so I'm going to break down the web process in a couple of ways that sort of compare it to a home. Where will your website live? These are some of the first decisions you have to make that are important. And again, some of you may have done this already, but just think of it as like where your house is going to be built. Where is your house going to be located? The street. Is that the address? It's like the domain name and let people know exactly where your house is at. What are the plans for your house? And this is a big one because a lot of times I run a couple of meetups and I always get someone that comes into the meetup with a very specific question that they want to answer. A lot of times when we build a site for a friend or our first client, they have something very specific that they want. And again, that puts you past the beginning stages where you need to be planning for accessibility. And so you're going right to a feature that's like, hey, I want a media room on the second floor instead of thinking about the whole house. What will you use to build the website? Again, this is like more materials, what you're going to build it out of. And these things, I'm going to sort of translate them into what they mean in WordPress. All right, first thing, you need to purchase a domain name. Most of the hosts in the WordPress community offer these services, but a lot of folks can find things cheaper on their own. One thing that I always recommend in our meetups is that at the end of the year, Black Friday through the first of the year, there's incredible discounts. So you can get domain names really cheap. I usually get them cheap and buy them out for 5 years at a really low price. Eventually, they'll try to raise the price and you could sort of move it somewhere else. But also that gives you a cushion or a runway to learn. So again, keeping your costs low. Finding a WordPress host. One of the stories I love to share is when I first started learning back in 2008, I got a host. It was a British host that had nothing to do with WordPress. It was the most difficult situation getting support, getting them to understand what WordPress is. And I eventually found out there's a list on the WordPress.org site of recommended hosts. Now, if you want to start a WordPress site, they have hosts that are specific to that need, and they'll walk you from zero to the end. They have lots of services, lots of support. They have wizards that walk you through step by step, ask you the questions, and at the end of that process, you have your website, you're up and running, allowing you to focus on content, testing, and things like that. And again, in this slide deck, there's links to additional resources. Okay. The next big decision, which a lot of people sort of skim over, and it's a point of contention in the community, is what are you going to use to build it? Right now, unfortunately, page builders are incredibly popular. And unfortunately, they're almost never accessible. So you have to do a lot of work to make them right. But people from the design community love them because it's drag and drop. Boom, boom, boom. You can spin up a site fast. But again, you're just putting out trash into the universe. So I always tell you to avoid those. And what I've done in the past couple of years is to really try to focus on full site editing and Gutenberg, which is WordPress's current software platform, which is allowing you some of the same capabilities of page building, but also being able to reference the WordPress repositories for themes that are accessible and accessibility ready, and giving you a head start on making something that's usable to everyone. And again, I'll have a link to that as well, and what makes a accessibility ready thing. All right. So we're going to jump out and try to look at a couple of things. Any questions or comments on anything that's been said so far? Okay.
Really wants to. You can share the Bitly link.
Okay.
Slides.
Okay. Let me do that in a second here. And again, the version that you see here, I'm sort of a creative person, so it's got lots of images and things like that, but the slide deck is just stripped down, black and white, accessible, alt text, because I really believe that everyone should be able to use it. But here I'm trying to get a point across, so hopefully there's nothing that's going to trigger or any colors that are going to make things difficult to see here. These are the slides. And if they could give me a signal when they have those, I'll put it up for a minute or so. And then again, it'll be available at the end of the presentation. And this is the Google Doc that has a lot more of the links that you see in the presentation. It's all in one place. All right. All right. So this is a host. This is a WordPress friendly host. And once you have an account with them, one of the cool things is that you can manage a lot of the needs that you have in one place. You can get, again, you can get a domain through them. It'll be a little more expensive, but again, they help manage it. You can do some email marketing things, but you can also manage, depending on your plan, a certain number of sites. So I'm just going to quickly go through the spin up process. One of the things that WordPress became popular for over time is what they call the 5-minute install. And now a lot of these hosts try to provide wizards that'll walk you through the process and have your site up in a couple of minutes. So let's go in and quickly, and unfortunately, I tried to, I tested this yesterday at my hotel, which was bad Wi-Fi. So hopefully we have good Wi-Fi and it won't take more than the time allotted. So we'll see. You sort of have a control panel that lets you see what you have there. I'm going to set up a temporary domain. One of the things that you should consider also if you're a developer or you want to really get in and get your hands dirty is you want a testing or staging environment, which some of the hosts provide as well, or if you're going to do it on your own, there's services like InstaWP or Local by Flywheel that allow you to build locally, or playground.wordpress.com that'll do that for you as well. So again, it's a wizard. It shows you, it gives you a couple of options as you go through the setup process. You can jump right to the end by skipping and creating a blank site. You can migrate a site, or you can start a new one. Let's just go ahead and just start a new one. Then again, it pops up another question for you. We want to do a WordPress site. A lot of the hosts have now sort of created their own bundle of their plugins as part of the web build process. But again, if you know, when you're trying to make something accessible, I believe in lean sites. So I try to use the core plugins or themes that provide the functionality that I need. I don't like any extra stuff. So, you know, you need an SEO tool, you need a security tool, that kind of stuff. So, and then you set up, you give them an email address and set up a password. Then they try to upsell you, of course. Again, depending on the host, you might get more of this. Just skip all that stuff. Oops. Then again, we want to skip more of the upsell. And so this is the infamous 5-minute install. They're saying it's going to take 2 minutes. Let's see how long it takes. And again, we're on Wi-Fi, so it may take a little longer. If you have a faster internet, hopefully it'll take less time. So theoretically, in 2 minutes, you're ready with a site that works. But I would suggest, and this goes to the topic, what should you do first? Once you have your theme in place, there'll be a default theme in place. I would test it immediately. And that'll take us to our next topic. Unfortunately, this is taking, we'll see if this is 2 minutes. Any questions while we wait for the spin up?
So just wondering around staging sites, what you'd recommend, because I've run into some staging sites where when you push it up to your production site, you clobber your database, which is not helpful. So how have you managed that previously?
Well, at our company, we had a couple of different flavors, and it goes back to a point that I made earlier. We're a government agency. We're hosted with a green hosting company that's a WordPress space. But then I like SiteGround because they have staging that seems to work. I mean, I don't have more technical answers than that, other than when it's time to push things up, it's pretty stable. I can get back to you and give you more specifics on that. And I know with local, if you have local, they'll allow you to push things up, and you can go through point by point and say, I want to push the database across. I want to push the assets across, so you can push specific things up.
Thanks.
All right, still working. So any other questions or comments? No? Yeah. All right. By the way, while we're waiting on this, some of the other things that I did, and this is silliness, and I apologize. I know someone yesterday was giving out stickers. Part of what I also wanted to do was get back to drawing. And in the WordPress community, there's these mascots that the Japanese WordPress community created called wapus. And for every WordCamp, they have a mascot for that particular camp. And I was so into into accessibility. When we did the AIR competition, which is the AIR Internet Rally for Nobility, our team, I developed a wapu for that. So I'll show you this. Oh, and by the way, it's done. And this is sort of the wapu, but its purpose was to combat trolls. So our team, this was accessible. So I'll leave these here, or you can pass them around if you want one. So anyway, we're done. You can jump right in. You can view your site. You could access the WordPress admin, or you can go to your site tools. One of the cool things about SiteGround is that their admin is very user-friendly. It's similar to the WordPress admin, where it's a black bar on the side. If you're a developer, it's like Git tools and things like that. Or you can just jump right in to the standard WordPress admin and work it the way that a lot of folks do in terms of just building content. So let's just go ahead and jump in. All right. So again, this is a little annoying, but they're wanting to help more. So this is another series of a wizard that asks you questions in terms of what kind of theme you want to use and things like that. And their plugins, we're going to skip that. because again, we didn't choose the SiteGround flavor of the WordPress site. So now we're basically in the site. This is a live site. It's up and running. If I point a domain to it, it's technically done. So theoretically, it's that simple to do a WordPress site. But again, let's just go and look at the front end. And there's a couple of browser-based tools that I recommend folks use that are just beginning to test your site. One is Accessibility Insights for the web. What it's basically going to do here, and unfortunately, we're going to go through and look at how to set up a really basic page. This is the template out of the box without any content in it. But let's just test it because, again, it's a good benchmark. You'll see how accessible it is out of the box. And then as you add information, add plugins, add functionality, add content, I would recommend you test all along the way and try to fix as you go instead of waiting to the end. So, okay. So Accessibility Insights have a couple really quick tools. One's the Fast Pass, which will quickly look at the site and run a report that you can export as a CSV file, send to your client, give to your team to work on. So let's just press that and see what we get. All right. So since the site was basically empty, it did find 9 instances where it failed. It said something about the area role. There were 8 instances of that. It actually tells you where it's at in the code. And it also gives you a how to fix, which is a neat tool for a beginner. Let's look at the second one. There's an issue with the list. And then again, it describes what the problem is. It tells you where it's at. And it tells you how you can fix it. You can export the result up in the upper right. And again, it'll export it as a CSV file that you can share with your team. So again, I would recommend along the way, each step of the way when you're designing your website or building your website, you continue to test with either browser-based tool or as it gets more complex, a tool that you find most comfortable for you. All right. All right, so let's just go back to the back end. For those that may not know, this is the WordPress backend. It changes as you add more stuff. Depending on the theme or plugin you use, sometimes it adds an admin on top of it, which could be a problem sometimes. But one of the good things about being in the WordPress community, you can contribute to different teams, and we'll talk about it later. The accessibility team, with the latest release of WordPress, they made over 100 fixes. And part of those fixes were on the back end, because again, when we think of accessibility, we just think of the customer facing part of it. But what about some of the people on the back end that are building it that may have a disability and need to use it? So a lot of those solutions were under the hood. I think there's a link in the doc file that jumps to a file that talks about what was changed or what was updated. But again, on the left-hand side, these are the key areas that are basic for it. And again, these 2 plugins were put in by the host, which I don't really like. And we'll go through how do you pick a plugin, how do you pick a theme with accessibility in mind. So let's sort of do that now. And then we'll get back in and look at a page and how you basically build a page in Full Site Editor. So let's go ahead and look at themes. I have an extra theme in my slide deck. When I went on my 90-day leave, I reached out to my brother. He's a print broker. He does printing and those kind of services in Los Angeles. And he reached out to someone overseas to build his website. And let me see if I could show you, because it's kind of hilarious, and hopefully he won't see this and be mad at me. But let's see here and again, there's a lot of extra slides. I didn't know how long we would take here. All right, so this was his site when I received it. You know, the physical page, things were all over the place. This was his menu. He worked with someone that knew WordPress. His site was basically broken. And so on the back end, what I saw with this, someone just created a random theme. So he had lots of bugs, you know, and we immediately moved host, and I said, hey, I have to rebuild this. So be careful who you use. Make sure you use someone that knows WordPress. As a matter of fact, it happens at our agency as well. As I mentioned, my life changed, and on January 1st, I retired to do more of this. And right when I was leaving, we had a vendor that was brought in to rebuild a part of our site. Our projects people have all the money. So, you know, when they're building a project that runs through your neighborhood, a subway, they get funds to build that project, but also they get funds to communicate to the public. And so they always come up with these great ideas. And one of their ideas was to build a PDF, a PDF system, which they wouldn't listen to me on. But the vendor that they chose didn't know WordPress. And we said, you need to know WordPress because our site is already WordPress. So again, make sure the person that you use knows WordPress. And it's not just, and no disrespect, not just a developer, all right? Because again, something like this could happen. So let me just jump back over. All right. So how do you pick a theme? One thing that's cool about the WordPress community is that there are over 13,000 free themes in WordPress. And I always joke, and I'll talk about this tomorrow in my other presentation, is that we think that our website is unique, that it's so beautiful, so different. But all websites just have a menu and certain features that they're just different colors. We may do something that's really cool technically. We may have to build something that sorts a list a certain way or does something really technical, but all sites basically look the same. But the theme repository has all those different flavors that you may want to look for that are free. But also everything that appears in the theme repository goes through a checklist. There are a number of checklists to just appear. And one of them is if you want to have your site considered what's called accessibility ready and have an accessibility ready tag, it has to meet certain accessibility guidelines, which are also in that doc. So when you're looking for themes, you can search by a number of different features. You could search by layout. So if you know that you want a theme that has 4 columns or the left sidebar, right sidebar, that's sort of a dated design feature, you can click that and it'll add it to the feature. I mean, add it to the filtered list. You can go by features, and the first feature is accessibility ready. And I would recommend you always start there because again, that's sort of a foundation for you to build your site on. But again, don't think that you're done with your work at that point. It's just a starting point. So these are all the themes. There are 105 that have the accessibility ready tag. And again, in the documentation, there's a link that tells you what does it take to become an accessibility ready theme. So again, you could see there's a number of different looks and feels. So it's not as boring as you think it may be. But again, it has a lot of different looks and feels that you can use as a basis. Now in full site editing, which is also awesome, is that now a lot of things are modular. We all build in components. And with full site editing, you can tap into the patterns library, the blocks library, and those are things that are already pre-built that you can just drag and drop in your page and build it. So again, any questions about how to pick a theme? One thing I would say, never search on Google for themes. Always use the repository. There's one thing that I think I glazed over when I was talking about one of the things you first need to do is what type of person are you? Are you the kind of person that likes to work on your car in your driveway? Or are you the kind of person like me that likes to take it to a dealer and let them deal with it? Because in the WordPress community, there's either WordPress.org or WordPress.com. WordPress.org are for the people that like to get in and do things themselves. You control every aspect of your website. You control the host, you control how you install it, you install your plugins and themes, and you work on it there. WordPress.com sort of represents hosts. You pay a certain fee and they give you certain services. At certain levels, you have more access, but at the basic levels, you're on their property. All right. The other thing I would recommend, let's take a look at, these are patterns, again, in full site editing. Now it's not really about the themes. The themes, think of it like your clothes. Themes are like how your site's going to appear to the world. You have a number of different ways you can accessorize. But now in full site editing, you can go piece by piece. You can say how I want to cover it. You can see all the cover image styles, or you can see how certain full width headlines work. And there's a whole library of those that are available to you right out of the box. You could basically drop them on your page, customize the colors or fonts, and you could build really quickly that way. There's also a blocks library. And you could, and again, the links are in the deck. And we'll go in and I'll show you where you'll see it in your admin as you work. But the one area that's a little more tricky, and there's over 59,000 of them, when you want to add function to your website, use a plugin. That's either you can add SEO capabilities, you can add a calendar, and there's 59,000 of them. And these are ones that have been improved in the repository. Just think of how many out there in the wild on premium sites and things like that. So I always recommend starting with the free plugin. Try to find something that's accessible that you could test. And then a lot of times, great plugins offer a premium version. And so you can always step up after you learn how to use it. So there are a number of ways that I recommend folks look for plugins. First is based on the feature. You can always search based on a topic. But some of the things you should look for is, when was it tested last? Sometimes it's a version that's 3 or 4 back, which is always an issue because that could break your site. Another important feature is the number of installs. It tells you that as well. So for instance, this one has over 4 million. There's lots of reviews for you to take a look at. Because again, a lot of times what I find happens is I go in, I install something, and then I can't figure something out. I go to community channel and there's 1 million comments about that specific thing. So it could save you time. Also, the rating. And then the final thing is how long it's been up there. You know, you might have a friend that builds a really cool plugin, but do you really want to risk your enterprise site with a brand new plugin that hasn't been used by a lot of people? All right. Okay, let's go back into the back end of the site. All right. Okay, so these themes come basic with it. In the WordPress community, each year they have a major release. And that major release also is accompanied by a new theme. It's based on the year. So this year's theme is 2025. And every theme that Automatic does is accessibility ready. This may look really plain, but this is already installed. So let's go ahead and, oh, if you wanted to add one, you can click on the add theme. And it brings up that same page that I showed you on WordPress.org with a number of the different themes. And these are based on installs. So some of the popular ones, unfortunately, Hello theme is a page builder. Astra is an older theme that does some things that aren't accessible. So again, I would say stick with the Automatic themes or an accessibility ready theme and work out from there. You can sort it based on the newest themes. And again, it shows you a number of different styles. And again, that's one complaint that I would hear. It's like, oh, WordPress doesn't really offer a number of different looks. But again, depending on how you want to build it, they have someone that's sort of built. And that's the cool thing about the community. The cool thing about the community is that if you think about a feature you need, someone's probably built it already.
So like the themes having accessibility rate,
The tag, yeah.
the
accessibility
tag,
ready.
do plugins have?
They do not.
They do not.
And that's one thing. There's Natalie McLeese did a presentation yesterday. She's a cool plugin builder that's in the accessibility space. That's one of the reasons why she's expanding out, is that she feels like the plugin repository isn't really curated like the themes repository. So that's why, 59,000 options is a little more risky. So you really have to test. Yeah, Natalie McLeese. Yeah, she presented yesterday. And there are a few on the Google Doc, a few plugins that are accessible, that are accessible that you can use for some basic stuff. All right. You can also look for themes that are based on blocks. Again, if it's a block theme, that means it works with full site editor. So again, what I found that I'm doing recently is, again, I've abandoned the older technology. I'm really trying to focus on block themes because that's where WordPress is going. You can look at You can create again, in the back end, you can, if you have a certain set of plugins or themes that you use, you can favorite them. So as you build other client sites, you can quickly do that. Or you can create blueprints in your testing and staging environment where you can have a series of plugins, themes, and you could do a one-click install of that stuff. So there's a lot of different ways to go. And again, the filtering things that I showed you on the other end, this is how it looks inside of your WordPress theme. You can go through and click different features that you want to see represented in a theme. Sure.
So when you were saying earlier that you have to test your plugins, can you give an example of what that looks like?
A plugin?
Like if you find a plugin you think you like, how would you?
Sure.
What would you look at to see if it's accessible?
Well, I would install it and then I would run that test on the front end. And then that'll give you some initial readings. Also, you can look in the community, the chat, and see if there's any comments about accessibility. I would look there as well. So those are probably the two places I would start. Okay. All right. So for plugins, again, the back end inside of WordPress, it looks similar. It lists the most installed stuff at the top. You can search based on whether you know the title or the topic or the feature of the function, and it'll put it out there and just install it. You could just click on install. Also, if you click on more details, it breaks down those areas we talked about. And I always look at the 1 or 2 star comments to see what people are saying about it. It tells you a little bit about when it was updated. This plugin was updated 7 days ago. So again, it's frequently updated, which is a good thing. It tells you a little bit about it. In this area, it'll also tell you if there's a premium feature required. What they used to do in the old days, and I'm dating myself, is they would bundle a theme with a certain number of plugins that gave you that look. So in order to get that look, you had to not only install a theme, but you had to install certain plugins and whip it up that way. So that was sort of a tricky thing. And those extra things that you had to install were premium plugins. So they would get you that way. So here is sort of where they would disclose something like that. All right. So let's go and do a couple of changes. We saw that the front end of the site looked like crap. It was a basic blog look, and there was no content. So let's go ahead and change that. One of the first things that you need to do, when we go back to those areas that where sites fail for WebAIM, this one is a slam dunk. You ready for something hard? All right. If you go to settings and reading, nope, that's not it. General. This is like the basic information about your website that's going to appear when people search for it. What's the site title, tagline, et cetera, et cetera. But what I wanted to show you is that one of the areas that most sites fail, and one area that WordPress is really strong in, is the document language. It has a missing, a lot of sites don't have that. That was one of the 6 areas. And if you look down here, there's a site language done just like that. So, one of the first things you'll do is you can set up your WordPress site in 2 ways. It could be a blog. You may have, like, for instance, I like to cook. So maybe I want to do a cooking blog about making pasta. You can create it in a blog format, and so it's already set up in that form. But what if you want like a landing page where you have a call to action or something like that? You can come into reading, and you have a couple of different options. And I'll plus it up so you can see it better. What it's currently set on is your latest post. So as you add posts, it's like the stream effect. And inside of that theme, it has a certain look. It'll put the pages in as you do it. Or you can do a static page. When you do a static page, that turns it into sort of a landing page format. And you can select a page that's already in your system. Let's see what's in the system. When you install from 0, you have a sample page and you have a sample post. Let's just go ahead and select that. If you were doing the blog format, you can customize how many posts show, how many a syndicated feed will pick up. You can say, hey, I want the full text excerpt. So for my cannellini pasta, I can have the full text in the stream, or I could just have an excerpt. And so you control some of the basics of it. Also, and this is, again, I apologize if I'm going too basic. This is a problem that a lot of people have that they forget. If you don't want anyone to see your website when you first spin it up, you know, the search engines are going to immediately try to index it. Click this box. That'll keep it hidden. But what happens is people will build it, get the approvals, go live, and they forget that that's there. And then your CEO will say, hey, where's the website? And you have to go back and unclick it. So you often forget about it once you do it. So it's a quick way. But unfortunately, that's cowboy coding. I always recommend against that. What cowboy coding is working on a live site and making changes on the live site. That could break your site. You can do a lot of damage to it. So have a staging environment, work on your changes there and push them up. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and save these changes. And let's just go back and look at the page. It's not going to really look a lot different, but now it's in the page format. And so we can make changes to it. Again, before it was just the basic blog format. So let's go ahead and edit our page. This is the back end for your pages. It's pretty basic. As you get more and more information, the difference between a post and a page is what?
Static page, like a website page, just a static page for a post. People can add comments and it changes.
Okay, that's good. I want a little more though. There's another distinct difference. No? All right. A page is, I would say it's an evergreen document. Like it's your address to your company. It's things that don't change a lot. A post is like you're doing a newspaper every day. It's a news story. It's a news sports story. So that's another distinguishment. That's correct, but that's the big distinguishing thing. So when you're thinking about how, and tomorrow in my class, we're going to talk more about the user experience aspect of it, but you need to think what things are going to appear where in the menu. You think about all that stuff up front. And again, what things are going to be evergreen about your company and what things are going to be updated or changed quite often. Because a lot of times, just like with accessibility, we build a site for a client and they think, I don't have to do anything. But a website is a living document and you want more and more people to view it, so it should really change. All right. So the first time that you jump into a page, you'll see their onboarding. You could just skip it, but if you're not familiar with the editor, this sort of walks you through the different things that you can do inside of blocks. All right. So this is a page. So how do you edit it? One of the things that influenced full site editing were things like Medium, a lot of the drag and drop features that provided a distraction-free editing experience. Before, in WordPress, there would be a menu at the top. It sort of looked like Microsoft Word, and you had the different things. Now it's much cleaner and more distraction-free. So say we want to add something. You can click in to anywhere on the page. If you hit a backslash, you get a number of different blocks that you can use. You can also find the blocks if you click on the plus sign here, and that gives you all the things that are basic to that theme. As we talked about earlier, on WordPress.org, they have blocks, patterns, plugins, etc. Up here, that was just showing the blocks. These are the patterns. If you click on them, it displays some of the content that you could just drag and drop onto your page out of the box. So again, this is what they've tried to curate it with the different sections of the page in mind. So this is what they call starter content, and you could just click on it and it pops it into the page, and like that you can just go in, make edits to the colors, the content, and post your page. You can also look at the different things that are in here. You have feature content, you have gallery options. So again, you have a lot of things that are pre-made. Yes?
And so when you add these things, these are all accessibility compliant. These are all compliant with all the over?
They are not. They are not. Some of them are part of the theme and some of them are from the repository. So what they are working on in WordPress is to try to make everything that's in that block library, they'll probably come up with a tag in the same way they did for themes. So you do have to be careful. Any other questions? Go ahead.
Well, like the follow-up to that is that then do I need to create a child theme and go into the PHP to change the tags that are included in the HTML in order to make this accessibility compliant, or what is the way to get this to compliance the quickest?
Well, with the newest release, they're coming up with something that sort of it taps back into my design side. They have they're calling it a style guide. And I'll show you that. It allows you to do your global edits that'll apply throughout the site. I'll have to confirm, but I think when you make changes to your global themes, once you've dropped it in the page, it should have applied to these areas. So, but I'll confirm to make sure. All right. Then you also have the ability to add media. One of the cool things, again, about the community is that, oh, we've got another question. No,
So is this Gutenberg? Is that what we're looking at?
Yes.
Is
This entire interface, and this comes standard with whatever install you do. Again, some people still go with a traditional theme or a page builder, and then the experience is different. But out of the box, one of the things that WordPress did in the last 7 years that a lot of folks are mad about is that now with full site editing, you don't really need a theme. You could sort of build these things, save them out of JSON. You can create your own templates if you know how to use JavaScript, and you could repurpose those and use them over and over again. Because again, you have all the different widgets and parts of the page that you could build on your own and then save those as templates.
And are there accessibility plugins that are specifically for Gutenberg to test and kind of automate some of the testing as you build out, like that gives you warnings? And
yes, there's Amber Hines makes the accessibility checker from Equalize Digital, and it basically, how many folks have used like an SEO tool in WordPress? Like if you use something like Yoast, it gives you a dashboard in the back end where you could look at some of your search things. The accessibility checker has a dashboard in the back end, and it tells you things that you need to work on in terms of accessibility. Yeah, I'll pull it up right here. Yeah, let me. And again, she has a free version, and then there's also a premium version that has more features. But let me go ahead and see if I can find it. Oops. Are there any questions in the chat while I do some typing here? Okay, so here it is. So again, this one, as you can see, it provides a dashboard, and there's one. It goes back to my warning. Look at that. It hasn't been tested with this version, although for accessibility, I would say try this. And I think they're consistently updating. I know her personally, so I would vouch for it. So yeah, so it gives you a dashboard that tells you how many errors, like they're in red, and then it gives you some other things. It's sort of like the Yoast red, green, yellow, like the stoplight thing. And it provides a dashboard that's inside of WordPress when you click on it. And I would recommend, each thing that you add, test your pages as you go. Also on the sheet, the doc sheet, Joe Dolson is another big voice. He's the head of the Make Accessibility team. He has a couple of plugins in the repository. The Able player, which is a accessible video player, is in there. So it's a lot of things. And hopefully I've listed them in the doc. If not, I'll keep that as a growing document as well. Right. Any other questions? So I've gone through like the basics. You'll need to know what plugins you want to use, what kind of functionality, what kind of theme you're going to use, how you're going to build it out, how you're going to test it. Again, it's good to have something inside of the WordPress instance that you could test, but also a free browser tool that you can use. And let me go back to sort of finish here, if we don't have any other questions. We've done the demonstration. Now it's time for some Q&A. And I've already covered some of it, so this is sort of like cheating. What's the best way, not best what, to choose a theme? Google search, from a theme foundry, or from the repository? How many threes? How many two? Okay, we got it. All right. It is a WordPress repository. These are really simple, I'm sorry. All right. Next question. What is the recommended way to choose a plugin? We already talked about that. Is it quantity and quality of reviews, ratings? Go ahead. Oh, 5? Okay. Okay, yes, that is true. See, these are really easy. And that's the thing about, I didn't know the audience. I could have made them much more difficult, but again, so I apologize if I'm insulting your intelligence. All right. Contribute to WordPress. And that's what the theme of this whole presentation was. And that's why I'm here is I love what Nobility does and I love what WordPress does. And I'm sort of trying to figure out how I'm going to mesh those two in the next part of my journey. But if you're interested in WordPress, you can contribute. If you feel that there's something lacking in the accessibility, you can join the accessibility team. They have bug scrubs where they go through all the tickets. If you're developer style, you can get in and help contribute. You can, they have bi-weekly meetings that are just more strategic. They have weekly bug scrubs that are geared towards getting the next version up and accessible. Like I said, this last version was a momentous place because when I joined the team, I was on the team for 3 years. There were over, tickets that have been in there for hundreds of years, but it's really based on volunteers fixing those issues. And for them to get 100 tickets done is pretty incredible. So 100 features. So you can find out about how to contribute at Make WordPress. Again, this is where we saw the plugin information. There's also information on the community. One great thing is that people always try to help. I have a couple of meetups in Santa Clarita that, since the pandemic happened, it's a lot more virtual. You can come in and there's different flavors. Like mine is more, I have topics and I try to have people in to explain things. They're also help desk style where you have a specific problem and there's a group of guys. They sort of remind me of those two guys in the Muppets that are up in the balcony. They're like a grumpy guys, but they're brilliant. That'll help you fix anything and they stay up till like 1 in the morning if you have an issue. So there's that way to get help. You can come here. They have support forums. They have a learn.wordpress.org, which are tutorials like a LinkedIn style, a LinkedIn learning style that'll walk you through, hey, I'm new at WordPress. How do I get going kind of thing, all the way to something more technical. And then these are the different teams that you can contribute to. Like for instance, I have a design side. I haven't joined the design team because when I was in the accessibility team, it was a lot of work. So depending on what your interests are, you can actually get in and again, shape the direction of WordPress. Unfortunately, a lot of folks feel like no one's listening to them, but just join a team and you have access to make difference. So again, that's the accessibility team. Right now, they're looking for people to help with polyglots, which means they want to translate WordPress into a number of different languages that could be used all around the world. And again, these are ways to learn WordPress. This is WordPress, learnwordpress.org. Again, these are some of the basic learning paths that are available. They have featured courses because again, a lot of this has happened in the last seven years with a lot happening in the last couple. So again, you could just jump in and start learning. So looks like my computer's moving slow. You can also look at what people have done in the past. Again, like I mentioned with plugins, if there's a topic you want to learn about, you can go to WordPress TV or on YouTube, they have a WordPress channel and you'll see all the topics that were presented at WordCamps. So for example, part of my craziness over the last 8 years, I organized, like we didn't have anything in our community. So I started a couple of meetups and like this conference, I did 3 WordPress conferences in Santa Clarita. And one of the things I'm proudest about as a win that I'll mention is that we were the first WordCamp where like this is all accessibility stuff, and this is brilliant. But in the WordPress space, there's a lot of different topics, and there's usually one or two accessibility topics. I did the first WordCamp where there was an entire track of over 24 accessibility topics. So those recordings are up here. There's also a link in the doc that just filters based on accessibility that'll bring back a lot of topics. Also topics on how to learn. And these are from all of the top voices in the community. So a lot of people that build, like Natalie's up there a million times. So people that make things and build things in the community are up on this channel. It's WordPress.tv. These are some of the meetups that you may want to check into. Yes?
I was just want to confirm something that I think I heard you say, is that I know about the annual themes that are offered by year that have their year as their name. And I thought I understood you to say, if you choose one of those themes, they're going to be accessible by default. Did I understand?
Well, they're accessibility ready. So they meet certain WCAG standards out of the box. But as you add things, you still need to test.
Well, certainly with
so it's sort of like your
plugins,
foundation.
I understand about the plugins that they're not necessarily accessible, but I mean out of the box. So of course they're available for years and years and years. So older ones are still available from years ago. So how long ago did they start making them? I mean, is this just like this year?
No, those tags. I'm sorry to interrupt.
3 years ago, or?
All those tags have been around a long time. And one of the great things is that you can go in and see when it was last updated. So a lot of times when there's a new release, they'll go back in and update the previous versions of those automatic themes.
Okay. And I would say that therefore, by default, if you created something like a link or a button or any other thing within a theme like that, it would be inaccessible. Well, not using a plugin just within the
I would say
theme.
you still need to test it though.
Always.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Good idea.
Because you have the ability to code it. So
Yeah.
you can switch to, instead of the more friendly, what you see, what you get view, you can do it. You can go back and look and edit the text, the code on the back end. So this is an accessibility meetup. They're very active and it's WordPress specific. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Do I understand it correctly that all of the WordPress themes that are named after the year that they were created are retrofitted, like they will continue to be updated for the way I understand it, they're just going to continue updating them.
Yeah, and I would just, like I
forever.
said, when you
Is
go
that-
to the theme and you look it up, just look at the when it was last updated. And
Right, but-
yeah.
But
Theoretically,
the intention is that they will be continued to be
That's correct.
maintained and updated, right?
that's correct.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. And those are made by automatic. Because some people in the repository, some people do the knockoff names to try to get you to get it. So just make sure it's by automatic. Yes.
Well, more of a comment,
Yes.
just for anyone that is setting up, don't go with a network or a microsite. Just get another domain. So that was one of my biggest issues when I started out. I went, oh, I want to have a blog site and I want to have my organization site separate. And once you add in that networking of the sites, it becomes extremely complex. You've got to redo everything on each of the sites. So if you do an update, if you change a plugin, anything like that, you have to do it on the main site, then you have to do it on all the child sites.
And you're talking about multi-site, yeah?
Multi-site. That's
Yeah.
the word.
And
yeah.
why don't you explain what multi-site is for people that may not know?
You'd probably do it a lot better.
Well,
but
go ahead.
But basically what you're looking at is if you want to have pretty much like two sort of separate sites that are sitting in the same domain. So they kind of piggyback off each other. So I still wanted to have it associated with my brand, but I didn't want to have it taking people away from my main site because different audiences.
Yeah, and another example is like at our company, we have an intranet. So the communications department has a site. The accounting department has a site. So all of those can be spun up as separate sites underneath one umbrella. And when we were hosted with WordPress VIP, we have two news information sites, one called The Source, one called El Pasajero. It's a Spanish language version of the English site, but they had the same theme, but different. They were styled differently and they were shared. They were a multi-site instance. So you can do some things. Unfortunately, you do have to do some global updates and things like that. But theoretically, a multi-site network, or like WordPress.com is a multi-site. So all of the sites that they host, like CBS, Time, they're all under a big umbrella. That's their host team. Thank you. So again, they're very active. They almost have something every week. So again, they have hosts in that talk about very specific topics. From like this week, they're going to talk about selling accessibility. Again, the one thing that I would like to see is that, you know, a closer alignment with Knowbility and their things, but this is more WordPress specific in terms of accessibility. All of the stuff that they do on that site, they also drive you to this page so you can get the video links and a lot of information via their newsletter. So again, these are more learning resources that you can use. This is the accessibility team. This page is looking pretty boring, but if you're interested in joining, it talks about what WordPress tries to do with their accessibility ready themes and the core project itself. Try to make it WCAG 2.2 accessible. These are the meeting notes over here. There's an accessibility handbook. And all these links are in the docs. It talks about theme accessibility. So specifically, if you want to know what makes an accessible theme, that's there. And a number of other things about when they meet. You can join the Slack. And there's a number of different teams in there. We talked about the themes. We talked about the plugins. We talked about the patterns. There's also a 24-hour accessibility conference coming up this fall called WordPress Accessibility Day, and it goes around the world. So starting at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, it travels through Asia. So speakers from all over the world get on and talk about accessibility in WordPress. So that's a great way to get involved with the community as well. All right, so this is the wins section, and I think I'm almost on the verge of running out of time. Let's talk about some things that you're proud of or that you've done, if you use WordPress or if not, or what you would like to do or like to see. I can start or go ahead.
So I'm curious, and I know this is a beginning class, and I'm really kind of an old beginner. I don't know how to say it. I worked on WordPress for somewhat several years ago. So new features have been added since the last time I spent much time in WordPress. This is a good refresher. But one of the things that I had to do, which is not somewhat related to accessibility, but I had problems with the meta descriptions that I wanted to include in the meta tag. So just if people, I don't know if you're aware of a meta description, but in the meta tags, you can include a description of the purpose of your website, usually in the form of sentences, not just little keywords and that kind of thing. And okay, so like I said, not directly related to accessibility, but somewhat. So I actually ended up having to just go into the code and add the meta description at that time in whatever theme I was working on then. And I know that some people who use WordPress don't really want to ever have to go into the code because WordPress does protect you from that a lot. So is that a default way to do that now? Or is in, like, for example, in these themes you're showing us, or is it always a plugin? Because I know plugins can help you with that. So I was just curious about how you add the meta description. I think the title tag comes out of strictly out of the settings. So I wasn't concerned. But what about the meta description?
Well, in the new setup, the information is like, depending on what you're doing here, it updates in the left column. So you do have some basics here. You can set your featured image. You can also set your meta tag information as this information updates, depending on whether you're on a page or a post. So it is available in the admin. I don't have anything. And I think by default now it pulls your title in the first part of your sentence here, but I think it's in the post. Let me make sure.
I think the title is in your settings. I think when you go to your settings, I think it's in the reading settings. But it's been a while.
All right. So here you can add your tags, your categories. You could put it, I think you can put your additional information in there as you build.
Isn't that added title though? Isn't that the H1?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
So the
and-
actual title tag that's in the tab, I think it comes out of your original settings, you know, like on the page that where you can put in a little blurb. I think it's that you can put the title in it.
Yeah, and if you don't do it there, it'll pull something from the page itself, the first
Really?
paragraph. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Very good.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
I'm just curious, you're referencing the docs and all of this stuff. Where do I find this information?
Oh, it's it was a second. I'll get to it real quick. All right. This one is the Google Doc. If you scan that, it'll take you to a Google Docs page. And it's going to look like this. Yeah, it's a Google Doc that has tons of tons of links and sure. Yeah, and I was overdoing it. I was like, let me provide it as a link. Let me provide it as a QR code. So. And I was going to end there, so because I don't know how much time we have. Okay. Okay. All right. So again, this part of my journey is just try to give back as much as possible. And I wanted to share some things that hopefully inspire you to do more or give back more. One of the things after watching the Crip Camp doc, I was part of there in the WordPress space, there are WordCamps that are similar to what this is, and they're all over the country, all over the world. There are 3 flagships, and these are the biggest ones. There's one in US, there's one in Asia, and one in Europe. And I was one of the leads for WordCamp US, and one of the coolest things was I tried to bring my accessibility as one of the lead organizers. I was the first person to create an accessibility team. Although they had it as part of another team in the past, I wanted to really focus on not just the website, the information on the website, but the venue. So at the very beginning, when they were doing the tours, we walked the venue. I looked at the entrances, were they accessible? We looked at the path through the venue. We've done it in cities where it's like a mile to go from one end of the conference to the other. And so I looked at those kind of things, how we can make our showrooms more accessible. The hotel itself, we worked with them on the number of accessible rooms they had. We tried to put as much information out as possible, as early as possible, to allow people to make the decision whether they can make the event or they have to find their own accommodations. Again, trying to be as inclusive and open as possible. So I was really proud about the stuff that we did. And again, this was from the Crip Camp video on the things that make our lives easier: the cut curb, the elevators, the bathroom stalls that provide enough room. So again, when I was part of that team, I was really focused on making the physical space as well as a quiet room. You know, folks that were neurodivergent, we had a small room where they could watch it off by themselves if they need to. So a lot of those things I was really proud about. So I really want to encourage you to try to change the environments that you're in. And I know you're all doing that. But again, I just went crazy and tried to do anything and everything. Also, a lot of conferences don't have great maps. And those maps aren't really accessible. They're just in PDF. So I did a walkthrough. We did a video walkthrough of how most people would access the conference. I also did like common path in a map, but also with a description, a text description, a turn by turn. I was kind of nuts. But it was great because again, it provided a service. We had folks on our team that had a disability. The gentleman that inspired the walk, the turn by turn, he was blind and he pointed me to the Braille Institute site. When they have their conferences, they do a turn by turn. And I want to leave you with this. This was me in Thailand. I live by this. If I can't do great things, I can do small things in a great way. So please, thanks for having me, but let's change the world, each and every one of us. So. And I'll show you the QR codes again if you need them. You can find me here, Joe Simpson Jr., on any of the platforms. And these are, again, the Google Doc file.